The battlefield stretched across the stars, but for a moment it was quiet. Hundreds of alien ships floated in formation, their weapons armed, their crews waiting for the signal to attack. The system's two suns cast a pale light over the broken remains of old wars. Twisted metal and shattered hulls drifting like ghosts in the void. The commanders of the gathered fleets believed today would be the final step. Today they would crush the last rebellion, and the galaxy would be theirs. Yet in that silence something felt wrong. Admiral Korvac of the Dravari fleet stared at his screens. His ships numbered in the thousands, supported by allies from 6 other species. Never before had so many forces gathered in one place. He felt the power in his hands, but he also felt unease. The void seemed to hold its breath, the crews whispered, some clutching their weapons as if an invisible enemy stood nearby. A signal pulsed across the dark, soft at first, then stronger. Every fleet received it at the same time. A strange frequency, not one used by any modern empire. Officers scrambled to decode it, their faces pale as the sound grew clearer. It was a voice steady, calm, not alien, not machine, but human. For centuries, the galaxy believed the humans were gone, wiped out in the Great Purge. Their worlds burned, their colonies scattered. No one had seen them in 500 years. And children grew up hearing stories of their savagery. Some called them myths. Others swore they had once fought humans and barely survived. But everyone agreed they were extinct now. The voice that echoed through every ship made the truth bleed through the silence. "This is a warning," the human voice said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. "You have broken the peace, you have forgotten what you did to us." But we did not forget. The bridge crews froze. Many could not believe what they were hearing. Some laughed nervously, shaking their heads. But even those who laughed found their throats dry, because the voice did not sound like a ghost. It sounded alive, it sounded close in the command chamber of the Zareth Dominion. General Thalik turned to his advisors. "It is a trick," he said, his voice harsh. "Humans are gone. This is nothing more than a coward's attempt to scare us." But though his words were strong, his eyes betrayed doubt. He remembered the old stories, the battles where a single human warship had destroyed entire fleets. He remembered the warnings his grandfather had whispered when he was young. "If the humans return, pray the stars hide you." The fleets waited, expecting more, expecting fire, but no attack came. The only sound was the steady hum of engines and the faint hiss of the human signal fading into silence. The battlefield had been ready for war, yet now none dared fire the first shot. Small ships broke formation, scouts sent to search the outer edges of the system. Pilots scanned every asteroid, every piece of wreckage, searching for the source of the signal. Their reports came back empty. Nothing, only drifting rocks and dead machines still. Every crew member felt eyes watching them from the dark. Minutes stretched like hours. The silence pressed against the fleets. Heavier than any cannon, captains began to argue, voices breaking over comms. "Attack the rebels before this madness spreads," some shouted. Others whispered for retreat. No commander wanted to admit it aloud, but the fear had already seated itself deep inside their ranks. Admiral Korvac gripped the armrest of his chair. His claws dug into the metal as he tried to steady his breathing. He wanted to dismiss the fear, to call it weakness, yet he could not shake the weight in the air. Something vast was moving beyond their reach. Hidden in the black, he thought of the humans, the ones who had once stood against entire empires alone. The thought made him colder than the vacuum outside his ship. Then another pulse came, not words this time, but a low tone. A heartbeat across the void, deep and heavy, it rattled the ships, making hulls groan. Weapon systems flickered. Lights dimmed and returned. It was as if the very stars trembled in warning. Some crews panicked, slamming their fists against controls, screaming that the humans had returned. Officers tried to calm them, but their own voices shook. Commanders shouted orders, but their orders sounded more like prayers. The great fleet that had gathered with pride and arrogance now stood frozen in fear of something they could not yet see. Above the battlefield, in the quiet dark, something shifted. No one could see it clearly. No one could measure its size. But every being in the fleets felt the same thing in their bones. Something vast had arrived. Something that did not belong to the galaxy's present age, but to its nightmares. The battlefield froze. The mighty fleets that had once believed themselves unstoppable held their breath as one. No one spoke, no one dared. Somewhere beyond the stars, the humans were watching. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy remembered what it meant to be afraid. The silence after the first message was worse than any weapon. Every fleet in the system floated without moving, as if afraid that the smallest spark would bring fire raining down on them. On the bridge of every warship, officers sat stiff, their eyes fixed on the screens, waiting for the signal to return. Some prayed it would vanish like an echo. Others feared it would come back stronger than it did. The static cleared, and the same human voice spoke again, calm, unshaken. "This is not the end," the voice said. "This is the beginning. We remember what you did. We remember the fire, the chains, the slaughter. We carry the scars. And we are here to remind you that humanity does not die." The words were short, yet they struck deeper than torpedoes across the enemy fleets. Thousands of crews shifted uneasily. Soldiers who had once mocked the old legends now stared at their commanders with pale faces. If humans were alive, if they still had ships, then every empire in the galaxy was in danger. On the bridge of the Zareth Dominion's flagship, General Thalek slammed his fist against the control table. "Lies!" he roared. "Tricks of rebels and scavengers. Do not let fear turn you into cowards." But even as he shouted, his voice carried less strength than before. His officers exchanged nervous looks. None of them wanted to be the first to say it, but they all felt it. The voice was real, too real, among the fleets. Whispers spread faster than any official order. "Humans survived," one crewman murmured to another. "They never died." The rumors grew with every passing moment. Memories long buried in history books crawled back to life. Whole academies had taught that humans were dangerous beyond reason, that one human ship could fight 10 of another race's. Now those same lessons returned to haunt the soldiers who had believed them only stories. Then the voice changed. The steady, calm tone gave way to something colder, sharper. It was no longer just a warning, it was a judgment. "You gathered your fleets here to crush the weak," the human voice said. "But we have come to remind you what true war is. This sky does not belong to you. It never did." A ripple of fear moved through the armadas. Thousands of screens flickered, and for a brief second, every display across the battlefield turned black. When the light returned, symbols none had seen for centuries burned on the glass. An emblem, a circle with 2 lines across it. The ancient crest of humanity. It glowed red like fire, as if stamped across the galaxy itself. "Impossible," Admiral Korvac whispered from his throne of steel. His claws trembled against the armrest. He remembered seeing that same symbol carved into the hulls of ancient ruins. He had laughed back then, calling humans a dead race. Now that symbol stared back at him, alive, burning. The message did not end with words, but with silence, silence heavier than before, silence that pressed into the hearts of every soldier. It was the kind of silence that carried promise, promise of death, promise of reckoning. All across the command decks, arguments exploded. Captains screamed to retreat before the humans showed themselves. Others demanded an immediate attack to crush the rebels before this illusion spread. But none dared fire, not yet. They were frozen between fear and pride, torn by the thought that their first move might awaken something worse. The scouts who had been sent to search the system returned one by one. Their reports filled the channels. Nothing detected, no ships, no bases. But every pilot's voice carried the same shake. "Something is here, we can feel it." They had found nothing, yet their instincts screamed that the humans were near, watching, waiting. On the bridge of the great Zareth flagship, General Thalek's hand hovered over the command controls. One signal from him could launch a barrage of fire that would light the skies. Yet for the first time in his life, he hesitated. What if the stories were true? What if one warship was enough to burn them all? His soldiers watched him, and in their eyes he saw not loyalty but fear. If he gave the order, would they even obey? The battlefield stretched silent again, only the faint hum of engines filling the void. Then a faint sound cut through every comm channel, slow, steady, a rhythm like a drum, like a heartbeat. Every ship heard it. Every soldier felt it. The sound grew louder, echoing across the fleets. It was not the sound of machines. It was something alive. The voice returned once more, softer this time, yet more terrifying. "We are not myths," it said. "We are not shadows. We are the fire you buried." And now the fire rises again. No threats followed. No demands, just that promise. The fleets looked to the skies, but the stars above remained empty. And yet none could shake the feeling that something vast and terrible was hiding just beyond their vision. The transmission ended, and for a long moment no one spoke. The greatest armies of the galaxy, millions of soldiers, thousands of warships sat in silence, trapped between disbelief and dread. They had come here to break the last resistance. But now it was their courage that was breaking. The battlefield was no longer theirs. It belonged to the humans, even if no one could see them yet. And as the stars flickered cold above the silent fleets, one truth settled like a weight in every heart. Humanity was back, and the galaxy would never be the same. The fleet stayed frozen in space, but the silence no longer felt empty. It felt crowded, heavy, as if unseen eyes were crawling over every hull. The alien commanders barked orders to restore calm, yet their voices cracked as if they were speaking to themselves rather than to their crews. The second human transmission still echoed in every mind. The words were not loud, but they were carved deep, and none could forget them. Scouts moved through the dark, their engines burning faint blue as they darted across asteroid fields and wreckage. Pilots stared into the void, sensors scanning, but nothing showed. Only the drifting corpses of old ships and cold rocks. Still, each pilot reported the same feeling. A shadow moving just outside their range. A presence that refused to be measured by machines. Some even swore they saw shapes. Giant outlines gliding silently among the stars. Too large to be fighters, too silent to be normal warships. Admiral Korvac leaned forward in his throne, his sharp eyes narrowing at the screen. "Increase sweeps," he ordered. "I want every shadow mapped. I want every ghost hunted." His words were fierce, but deep down he already knew the truth. Shadows did not frighten veteran fleets, unless those shadows belonged to something real. On the bridge of another ship, Captain Ural of the Zarin Alliance gripped the railing so hard his knuckles turned white. His crew shifted nervously, whispering about the emblem they had all seen burned into their screens. The human crest, that mark had haunted history books, a mark that had vanished 5 centuries ago. Now it returned like a scar reopened. "Captain," one of his officers whispered. "If they survived, then what else did they keep hidden?" Ural had no answer. The scouts kept sending reports, and with every minute their voices shook more. "Nothing on sensors, but something is there," one said. "We see movement, but when we look again, it's gone." Another pilot swore he felt his ship's hull vibrate, as if something vast had passed by him. Yet his monitors showed only empty black. Then, without warning, the stars shifted. Not in truth, but in sight, for just a heartbeat. A colossal silhouette blocked the farthest lights. No one could capture it. No sensors recorded it. But every eye across the fleet saw it. A shape too big, too dark, sliding through the void like a predator among prey. Fear spread like fire. Whole crews gripped their weapons, even though no enemy had boarded them. Generals shouted to keep formation, but whispers broke discipline faster than orders. "It's them," soldiers muttered. "The humans are here, and they are watching us." The Zareth Dominion's General Thalek refused to accept it. He stood at the center of his bridge, his voice a roar. "Illusions, all of it. This is trickery. Some rebel toy meant to frighten us, fire on the asteroids." "Clear the field," his fleets obeyed, unleashing waves of cannon fire into the rocks. Explosions lit the void. Shards scattered in every direction. For a moment, they thought they had driven the shadows away. But then the lights dimmed. Every ship, every fleet, all at once. The battlefield went dark as if a curtain had fallen. The only glow left was from the wreckage burning after their own attack. And in that faint firelight, the shadows moved again. Slower this time, deliberate. Admiral Korvac's chest tightened. He had fought countless wars, crushed entire planets. But never had his heart felt so heavy. The humans had not even fired. Yet their presence was breaking the courage of armies. The silence they carried was more powerful than 1,000 cannons. One young officer whispered, "Admiral, why do they not attack?" His voice cracked with fear. Korvac turned, but no words came. For he too wondered the same thing. Why wait, why watch, unless they wanted the fleets to taste their own terror first? The shadows thickened, and though no one could explain how, the commanders realized something chilling. The shapes were not many, but one vast silhouette stretching across the stars. Moving with patience, the realization sank like stone in water. This was not a fleet, not a swarm of ships. It was a single warship, a single leviathan large enough to blot out constellations. Gasps echoed across comms, officers argued. "It cannot be real," they said. "No ship can be that size." Yet every eye saw it, and every heart knew the truth. Only humans would build such a monster. Only humans would hide in silence until the galaxy's strongest armadas cowered before a shadow. General Thalek's voice turned desperate. "Prepare all weapons," he shouted. "If this is a human trick, then let them taste our fire. Open every cannon, every missile bay now." His commands shook the fleets awake, warships shifting as weapons aligned. But even as the lights of their cannons lit the void again, hesitation gripped them. Soldiers asked themselves, "What if we shoot and it shoots back?" Then came the sound, not words, not a voice, but a vibration, a low rumble that made hulls quiver and bones rattle, a growl across the stars, deep and ancient. It was not mechanical, it was alive. The warship was not hiding anymore. It was speaking in its own way. Fear shattered discipline. Several smaller ships broke formation. Fleeing into the void, others tried to follow, but commanders screamed at them to hold. Yet their screams were drowned by the sound that seemed to crawl inside every mind. It was the sound of something awakening. In that moment, all across the fleets, one truth became clear. They were not the hunters here, they were prey. The shadows were no trick, no illusion. The humans had returned, and their warship was watching. The battlefield, once full of fire and pride, was now nothing more than a cage of fear. And as the giant shadow slid deeper into the starlight, blotting out the heavens above, every soldier knew the same truth. This was only the beginning. The real war had not yet started, and already the galaxy was trembling. The stars had always been there, tiny fires scattered across endless black, but now they were gone, swallowed by a shadow that stretched across the battlefield. Thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, all lifted their eyes to the void above, and for the first time they could not see the sky. What loomed above them was not a formation of fleets, not a swarm of cruisers, but one single ship. It emerged from the darkness with a silence more terrifying than thunder. Its hull was blacker than space itself, smooth and endless as if built from the night. No light reflected on its surface. Instead, the light seemed to vanish the moment it touched it. As the warship moved forward, it revealed itself piece by piece, a structure so vast that dreadnoughts looked like insects beside it. On the Dravari flagship, Admiral Korvac rose from his throne. His claws dug into the steel armrest as he stared wide-eyed at the colossal shape. "By the stars," he whispered. His officers could not even breathe. They had seen titans of war before, great battle stations and fortress ships, but never anything like this. The human warship was not built to match the galaxy's standards. It was built to surpass them, to crush them. Engines burned faint blue along its edges, silent and steady. Each one alone was larger than a capital ship. Cannons dotted its sides like mountains of steel, their barrels dark and cold, waiting. The hull carried scars, ancient marks of battles long past, battles the galaxy thought forgotten. Yet here it was, not destroyed, not broken, but alive. The battlefield froze in awe. Even the strongest commanders forgot to breathe. Crews stared through glass screens as though they were staring at a god. Whispers filled the channels. "It cannot be real," one soldier said. "No ship can be that size," another muttered. But their voices cracked, and in their eyes was not disbelief but terror, because the ship was real and it was theirs, human. General Thalek of the Zareth Dominion slammed his fist down, trying to break the fear that bound his crew. "Fire!" he ordered. "It is only one ship. One ship cannot fight all of us. Fire everything." His voice echoed, but no one moved. Officers looked at their weapons panels, their fingers hovering, trembling. The order was clear, yet their bodies refused. Why? Because deep inside they knew the truth. This was no ordinary warship. This was something that should not exist. A beast carved from the bones of forgotten wars. A relic of terror meant to remind the galaxy what fear truly was. The warship kept moving, slow and steady. As if it had all the time in the universe, it did not rush, it did not attack. It simply let its presence speak. Its size spoke louder than fire. Its silence screamed louder than any battle cry. It was a predator surrounded by prey that dared not move. On board the fleets, crews began to break. Some cried openly, soldiers gripping their weapons with shaking hands as if rifles could harm a mountain. Others whispered prayers in alien tongues, calling to gods they had long abandoned. Fear spread like a plague, and no order, no chain of command could stop it. Then the ship's lights flickered. A glow rippled across its hull, faint at first, then brighter. Symbols began to shine, the old human crest carved into the steel. A circle with 2 lines burned red across its surface, so massive that every ship, no matter its position, could see it. It was not just a symbol, it was a brand, a reminder. Humanity was not a myth, humanity had returned. Admiral Korvac's voice shook as he whispered, "We are standing in the shadow of their vengeance." His officers turned to him, eyes wide with the same terror he felt. No battle plan could prepare them for this. No strategy could match something born to dominate. The warship finally stopped, drifting into the center of the battlefield. The stars behind it remained hidden. Its shadow covered entire fleets. Alien dreadnoughts, once proud and mighty, looked like fragile toys beneath it. Still, the warship did not fire. It did not need to. The silence, the shadow, the sheer weight of its presence was enough to paralyze the galaxy's armies. Across the channels, static broke. Then the voice returned, human, calm, steady. "You gathered here for war. You thought yourselves strong. You forgot who taught the galaxy what war truly is." The words cut through the comms like blades. "We are not myths, we are not gone, we are humanity. And the sky belongs to us." Every commander felt the weight of those words. The strongest empires, the cruelest warlords, all reduced to silence. No one dared reply. No one dared challenge. General Thalek clenched his jaw, rage burning beneath his fear. "One ship cannot defeat us," he growled. "I will prove it." He raised his hand, ready to give the final order to fire. But as his mouth opened, a sudden tremor ran through the void. The warship had shifted slightly, only slightly, but the movement alone silenced him. It was like a predator tilting its head toward prey, asking, "Do you really wish to try?" Thalek's throat closed, his hand dropped. His officers did not move, no one fired in that instant. The mighty Dominion realized that strength meant nothing when standing beneath the shadow of humanity. The warship's silence stretched. Heavy and unbroken, the battlefield lay frozen, not because weapons were disabled, but because courage itself had been. And as the human warship hovered, blotting out the heavens, the galaxy understood a truth it wished it had never remembered. The humans had returned, and the sky no longer belonged to anyone else. Fear had become the strongest weapon on the battlefield. Stronger than lasers, stronger than missiles, stronger than the will of 1,000 admirals. The human warship had not fired a single shot, yet the gathered fleets trembled as if the end had already arrived. Its vast shadow smothered the stars, its silent presence pressing into the hearts of every soldier. No commander dared to move first inside the Dravari flagship. Admiral Korvac's crew sat in stunned silence, their claws hovered over controls. But none could force themselves to act. The admiral's throat felt dry. He had faced rebellions, crushed empires, and silenced entire systems, but never had his chest been so heavy. He realized a truth that chilled him. Fear was spreading faster than fire. Across the comms, captains from allied fleets argued, their voices cracking with panic. "We must retreat before it destroys us," one shouted. Another snarled, "No, if we run it will hunt us down one by one." "We must fire first," but even those who spoke of attack lowered their voices, afraid the warship might hear. General Thalek of the Zareth Dominion slammed his fist on the table, his voice desperate. "It is a trick, do you hear me? One ship cannot defeat all of us. They are trying to frighten us, and it is working. Do not let old stories turn you into cowards." But though he roared like a beast, his soldiers only exchanged glances. His words sounded like lies even to himself. In the smaller vessels, soldiers whispered tales once buried in history. "My grandfather said he fought a human once," one murmured. "He said a single soldier took down an entire squad," another muttered. "They say human ships were like nightmares, always outnumbered, but never outmatched." Stories once laughed at now felt like warnings, and every crewman believed them. The fear began to rot discipline. Small ships drifted out of formation, trying to distance themselves from the shadow above. A few captains, without orders, started warming their jump drives. Hoping to flee the system, officers tried to stop them, but terror had already unchained them. It was spreading like a disease through every rank. On board the Zarin Alliance ship, Captain Ural gritted his teeth. He had fought for 40 years. He had seen empires rise and fall, but never had his own crew looked so broken. They clutched their stations as though the ship itself could not save them. His second officer whispered, "Captain, why does it wait? Why does it not fire?" Ural had no answer, and that terrified him more than the warship itself, because waiting meant confidence. Waiting meant the humans were so certain of their power that they did not need to rush. They wanted the fleets to break themselves without a single shot fired. Then the warship stirred. Its colossal hull shifted slowly, almost lazily. The movement rippled through the fleets like a scream. Soldiers cried out, some firing their weapons in panic at empty space. Bright flares lit the void, but the beams died before reaching the warship, absorbed by its black hull as though it were swallowing light itself. And then came the sound. Not words, not music, but a low hum. It rolled through the battlefield, deeper than thunder, making every hull tremble. Lights flickered, engines wavered. It was as if the warship's very presence was bending the battlefield to its will. General Thalek's officers clutched their seats, some covering their ears though the sound was inside their bones. Thalek forced his voice to rise above it. Do not falter, it is only sound. Machines cannot harm us with noise, fire on it now. But his words were drowned. Not by the hum, but by silence. None obeyed, none dared. Admiral Korvac leaned forward, whispering to himself, They want us to fire first. They want us to prove our fear, and he was right. For the warship had still not unleashed a single weapon. Yet every soldier believed destruction was already upon them. In the ranks of the Dominion, young soldiers broke into chaos. Some dropped their weapons. Others begged their commanders to retreat. Veterans who had mocked the younger recruits now gripped their own rifles with shaking hands. In the face of the warship, all were equal, equally afraid. One by one, ships faltered, formations broke. Entire squadrons drifted apart, commanders screaming to hold position, but their voices no longer carried authority. The chain of command was collapsing then, without warning. The warship's hull glowed faintly. A line of light traveled across its surface, brightening until it seemed like fire carving ancient scars. It was not a weapons blast, not yet. It was a reminder, a signal. Humanity was showing them the smallest glimpse of its power. And still, none dared fire back in that moment. Every commander realized the truth. This was no battle of ships and cannons. This was a battle of will, and the galaxy was losing. General Thalek slumped in his chair, rage burning behind his eyes. But even he could no longer deny it. The fleets were unraveling. Not because they were outgunned, but because they were outfeared. Humanity had turned silence and shadow into the sharpest blade of all. And as the warship hovered above, blotting out the sky, every soldier, every commander, every fleet knew the same thing. If humanity chose to strike now, the galaxy would not survive the first blow. The silence shattered, not with words but with fire. The human warship finally moved, its black hull tilting slightly as if it had grown tired of waiting. For hours it had hovered, letting fear eat through the fleets like rust through metal. Now it was time to remind the galaxy what war truly meant. A low hum rolled through the void, deeper than thunder. It began as a vibration that rattled hulls, then grew into a pulse. Every ship felt it, every soldier heard it. Even though no sound should exist in the vacuum, lights flickered across the alien armadas. Weapons panels sputtered, engines stuttered. It was as if the human warship's very presence bent the battlefield into silence before the storm. Then came the light. A single cannon on the warship's hull glowed faint blue. The glow spread like veins of lightning across the surface, winding into patterns that no alien recognized. The weapon charged slowly, deliberately, letting every fleet see, letting the fear reach its peak. Crews shouted across comms, begging their commanders for orders. Some screamed to fire, others begged to retreat. But it was already too late. The cannon released. A beam of pure white fire tore across the void. Not fast, not wild, but controlled, precise. It moved like a blade, slicing through the dark. And wherever it passed, ships ceased to exist. Whole squadrons were erased in one breath. Their hulls didn't explode. They simply disintegrated, as if the beam had rewritten their very atoms. Gasps echoed across comm channels. Millions of soldiers saw entire fleets vanish before their eyes. No wreckage, no flames, just silence where once warships had stood proud. The shockwave rippled outward, shaking the survivors, sending panic through the armadas on the Dravari flagship. Admiral Korvac gripped the railing with both hands. His eyes were wide, his throat dry. One shot, he whispered. One shot and they erased an army. His officers said nothing. They could not, their minds refused to process the sight. General Thalek, aboard the Dominion flagship, slammed his fist against the console, desperate to regain control. All weapons, fire, fire now, he screamed. The Dominion fleet obeyed at last. Hundreds of dreadnoughts unleashed their cannons, beams of plasma, arcs of missiles, streaks of burning light. The sky lit up in fury. The barrage reached the human warship, but the blasts did not tear into it. Instead, they scattered, sliding harmlessly off its black hull, Explosions blossomed in the void. Beautiful but useless, the warship stood unshaken, as if mocking the galaxy's strongest fleets. And then, without hurry, it fired again. This time the beam swept sideways, cutting through another cluster of ships. Their shields cracked, their engines failed, their hulls broke apart like paper. Whole crews vanished before they even had time to scream. The battlefield, once alive with fire, now looked like a graveyard. On board the Zarin Alliance vessel, Captain Ural stared at his monitors in horror. "This is not war," he said softly. "This is slaughter." His crew turned to him with pale faces. Some begged to flee, others whispered prayers. For the first time in his life, Ural could not think of a single order that might save them. The warship kept moving, each strike measured, calm. It did not fire wildly. It did not waste power. Each beam was like a scalpel, precise, deliberate, and with every shot, it reminded the galaxy of one truth. Humans had mastered the art of war not to fight battles but to end them. Ships broke formation, captains abandoning orders to flee. Some vanished into hyperspace, others turned desperately toward empty stars. But fleeing was useless. The warship fired a third time, and the fleeing ships never made it. Their drives collapsed before they could escape. Leaving only silence, fear reached its peak. Entire fleets crumbled without a single boarding party. Commanders shouted for unity, for bravery, but their soldiers no longer listened. Pride had shattered, only survival remained. Admiral Korvac sank into his chair. His heart heavy, he had believed himself powerful. Untouchable, yet now he felt like prey. His second officer leaned toward him, voice trembling. "Admiral, we cannot win, not against that. What do we do?" Korvac closed his eyes. Shame burned him, but the truth was undeniable. "We survive," he whispered. "That is all we can do." The human warship slowed, letting the silence stretch again, its cannons cooled, its lights dimmed. Yet every soldier knew it was not mercy. It was a message. It had shown them a fraction of its strength, and still it dominated the battlefield. The comms crackled once more. The human voice returned, calm, almost gentle. "This was your lesson," it said. "War is not numbers, war is not noise, war is will. And your will has already broken." Every commander froze. The words cut sharper than the beams, because they knew it was true. They had come with pride, with arrogance, with endless fleets. Yet a single human warship had shattered them before the real war had even begun. The battlefield lay silent again, wreckage drifting among the stars. The survivors held their breath, terrified the warship might strike once more. But it did not. It only watched, patient, unmoving, reminding them with its shadow that the galaxy had changed forever. Humanity's first strike was over, and the galaxy had already lost. The battlefield was no longer a place of battle. It was a graveyard drifting in silence. Wreckage floated where proud fleets had once stood, and survivors clung to the trembling decks of their ships, waiting for death that had not yet come. The human warship hovered at the center, its black hull blotting out the stars, its cannons glowing faintly like sleeping volcanoes. It had proven its strength, and now it did not need to fire again. The comm channels, once filled with orders and threats, were silent. No commander dared to speak first. Every word felt dangerous, as if the humans would punish even sound. Then, without warning, the silence broke with the human voice. "Calm and sharp, you came here to conquer," it said, echoing across every ship. "You thought numbers gave you power. You thought arrogance made you strong. But war is not noise, war is not pride, war is truth. And the truth is this: you are weak." The words cut deeper than the beams had. Soldiers lowered their heads, commanders gritted their teeth, but none could deny it in minutes. The humans had turned the galaxy's strongest fleets into scattered fragments, and they had done it without haste, without panic, with nothing but precision. General Thalik of the Zareth Dominion slammed his hands against the console, his rage shaking his voice. "Do not listen to them," he roared. "They are one ship cannot rule the galaxy." But his crew only stared back at him, their faces pale, their bodies frozen. They had seen the truth, and no amount of shouting could blind them again. The human voice continued, almost soft now, almost cruel in its calm. "We did not come here for conquest. We came here for memory. You burned our worlds. You chained our people. You tried to erase us. But humanity does not vanish. Humanity does not kneel. And humanity does not forgive." On board the Dravari flagship, Admiral Korvac closed his eyes. The words struck him harder than the beams had. He remembered the ancient stories, the whispers passed down by old soldiers. He had dismissed them as legend, now he understood. They were warnings. Warnings that had come too late. The warship's lights brightened, casting a faint glow across the wreckage. It looked less like a machine and more like a monument. A vast reminder of something greater than war. The fleet stared in silence, unable to look away. Then the human voice shifted, no longer calm but fierce. War ends today, or your world's burned tomorrow. The threat was not shouted. It did not need to be. It was spoken like a promise, a fact carved into the stars, and every commander believed it. Because the warship had already shown what it could do, fear turned into chaos. Some fleets broke immediately. Captains screaming for retreat. Engines flared as ships jumped into hyperspace without waiting for orders. Others tried to rally, but their soldiers refused to fight. They sat at their stations with hollow eyes, unwilling to raise weapons against a shadow that could not be defeated. General Thalic raged, shouting curses into his comms. Cowards, all of you, fight or die as slaves. But his words were swallowed by static. His fleets were already dissolving around him. No one would listen, not even his own officers, who looked at him with fear not of the humans but of him. Their loyalty had broken. On the Ziran Alliance vessel, Captain Ural leaned forward. His crew looked to him for orders, and for the first time he whispered the words they had all been too afraid to say. Stand down! The officers froze, shocked. But Captain... Ural raised his hand, his eyes locked on the warship. If we fight, we die. If we obey, we die. But if we stand down, perhaps we live. Across the battlefield, more commanders followed. Quiet voices broke through the static. Stand down. Power down weapons. Hold fire. Lights across the fleets dimmed as weapons were lowered, not in surrender, but in survival. The warship did not move, it simply watched, its silence heavier than any attack. And slowly, the battlefield bent to its will. Entire armadas sat powerless, stripped of pride, stripped of courage. Reduced to waiting, then, as if to seal the moment, the human warship unleashed a pulse, not of fire but of light. It rippled across the void. Touching every ship, it did not destroy. It did not burn, instead it carried the human crest, glowing red across every screen. Remember this day, the voice said. Remember who returned. Remember who you feared. Admiral Korvac's claws trembled against the steel of his throne. His voice cracked as he whispered, The galaxy belongs to them now. No one argued. No one dared. The warship turned slowly, drifting away from the battlefield. It did not pursue. It did not finish the slaughter. It left the survivors alive but broken. Their ship still floated, their bodies still breathed, but their spirits were crushed. Humanity had not just won a battle, it had claimed the galaxy's soul. As the shadow slid back into the stars, the survivors looked upon the wreckage and knew the truth. The war was over before it began, humanity had spoken, and their message burned brighter than any weapon. The galaxy's fate had changed forever, and all who lived that day would carry the memory until their last breath. Humanity was back, and this time no one could stand against them. The stars had returned to the battlefield, but no one dared look at them the same way again. Where once alien fleets filled the sky with fire and pride, now only wreckage drifted silent and cold. The human warship no longer fired, no longer spoke. It hovered like a mountain in the void, unmoving, unchallenged. Its shadow stretched across the survivors, a silent warning that echoed louder than any cannon. The alien commanders gathered their courage in whispers. Admiral Korvac sat slumped in his steel throne, his claws trembling against the armrests. He had seen empires fall. He had crushed rebellions, but nothing compared to this. He turned to his officers, his voice low. They left us alive on purpose. His officers nodded slowly, each one pale with fear. Alive. To carry the story, one of them whispered. Across the comms, fragments of voices crackled. Survivors speaking not in threats but in fear. It was only one ship, a captain said, his voice hollow. One ship destroyed fleets we thought invincible, another whispered. If they have more. The thought trailed off because no one dared finish it. The silence that followed was heavier than the war itself. General Thalic of the Zarath Dominion stood stiff on his flagship, his face twisted with rage. His pride screamed at him to fight, to refuse defeat. But even he could not deny the truth. His officers avoided his eyes. Ashamed, afraid, but above all broken. They had seen a single warship bring down the strength of the galaxy. Thalek's voice cracked as he muttered, "This is not the end. They cannot rule us with shadows." But his words sounded small. Even to himself, the human warship pulsed once more. Not with weapons, but with light. A ripple spread across its black hull, glowing lines carving themselves like scars into steel. The crest of humanity burned red, fast and unmissable. Every screen, every sensor, every mind locked on it, the message was clear. Humanity had not returned to hide. They had returned to stand above. The voice came again, soft, steady, but carrying more weight than fleets of dreadnoughts. "The war is over. You thought you could gather your strength, crush the weak and claim the stars, but today, you learned the truth. The stars do not belong to you. The sky is ours." The survivors held their breath, waiting for more, waiting for fire. But no fire came, only silence. It was worse than destruction, for it left them alive with nothing but fear. Some ships fled immediately, their engines burning as they vanished into hyperspace. Others drifted aimlessly, their captains unable to give orders. Soldiers sat in silence, their hands shaking, their eyes hollow. The battlefield was not just frozen by shadow, it was frozen by shame. Admiral Korvac finally spoke to his officers, his voice heavy. "This is no battle, this is history. The galaxy will remember this day for 1,000 years." He lowered his head, ashamed. "And we will be the ones to tell it." Captain Ural of the Zarin Alliance whispered almost like a prayer. "We were children playing with fire, and the humans have returned to show us who lit it first." His crew sat silent. Some nodded, others wept. None looked him in the eye. They all knew he was right. The human warship began to move, slow and deliberate. It turned away from the battlefield, its engines glowing faintly. It did not rush, it did not retreat. It drifted like a storm cloud, leaving ruin in its wake. The silence it left behind was heavier than the ship itself. The survivors watched it go, afraid to speak until it was gone. When the last shadow of its hull vanished into the stars, the battlefield erupted, not in fire, but in desperate voices, captains shouting to retreat, officers begging to regroup, soldiers pleading to return home. No one spoke of victory, no one spoke of pride. All that remained was survival. General Thalek fell back into his chair, his face pale with fury and dread. He had sworn the Dominion was unbreakable, that no one could challenge them, yet here he was, alive, defeated without ever truly fighting. He clenched his fists, but his voice broke as he whispered, "One ship, only one." The wreckage drifted quietly around them, a monument to arrogance destroyed. The survivors would return to their worlds with stories. Stories of shadows swallowing the stars. Stories of fire that erased fleets in a single breath. Stories of humanity, reborn in vengeance, and those stories would spread faster than any fleet. Faster than any weapon, children would grow hearing them. Commanders would train fearing them. Empires would think twice before raising their banners again, for humanity had returned. Not as myths, not as whispers, but as rulers of the sky. They had frozen a battlefield without needing to finish the slaughter. They had turned fleets into ash with only a taste of their strength. And then they had left not to conquer but to remind. The stars shone again, but they no longer belonged to the galaxy's empires. Every survivor knew the truth. The galaxy had changed forever. The sky now carried only one shadow, one name, humanity.